There is a silence that enters before they arrive. Not the kind of silence that soothes, but the kind that unsettles. An invisible tremor in the air, the faint awareness that something is about to be rewritten. Narcissists do not come as villains cloaked in obvious shadows. They appear as light, as brilliance, as a very embodiment of what your longing secretly craves. They mirror, they reflect back to you your own unspoken desires. They were the mask of perfection, charm dripping like honey, confidence pressed into every gesture. Yet beneath this mask lies not fullness, but hunger, a void shaped by wounds so deep they cannot be faced. Their entire existence is built around escape, projection, and control. Carl Jung taught that the shadow, when unacknowledged, dominates from the depths. The narcissist lives inside this domination. Rather than integrate, they externalize. Rather than confront the emptiness within, they feed on the attention, energy, and devotion of others. Every smile, every word, every gesture is crafted not for connection, but for extraction. And here is where you stand, perhaps not knowing. For at first, you see in them the anima, the dream, the answer to your ache. They carry a presence that feels faded, like an archetype stepping from myth into your living room. You think this is admiration, attraction, destiny. But what it is, in truth, is a performance, a projection meant to disarm your defenses and weave you into their story. The ancient Stoics warned of appearances, that what dazzles at first often conceals what destroys later. The narcissist embodies this truth. Their brilliance is not light but reflection, bouncing your own light back at you until you mistake it for theirs. You are not falling in love with them. You are falling in love with yourself, painted across their carefully constructed mirror. And in this, the stage is set. For what follows are not random gestures, not unconscious mistakes, but deliberate tricks, dark psychology woven into the very fabric of their being. Each one designed to shift your perception, bend your boundaries, erode your sovereignty, until you find yourself doubting not them, but your own reflection. This is where their power lives, not in who they are, but in what they make you believe about yourself. And unless you learn to see the shadows behind the light, unless you learn to recognize the patterns of their craft, you risk becoming a character in a play you did not audition for. The darkness begins not with violence, but with seduction, not with cruelty, but with enchantment. And if you listen closely, you can almost hear it. The subtle whisper of manipulation dressed as love. It begins with intensity. The narcissist knows that to control, they must first enchant. And so they flood you with attention. Words that drip with admiration, gestures that feel like destiny, eyes that seem to study every hidden corner of your soul. This is not love. It is theater. They are not seeing you. They are projecting onto you. They have sensed the archetype you long to embody. The muse, the goddess, the savior, the dream. And they mirror it back with terrifying precision. Jung called this projection, the unconscious casting itself outward, making another the vessel for its unmet desires. You, in those moments, feel chosen. You feel seen in ways you've never felt before. Every message, every compliment, every sudden gesture of devotion is like fire poured into the cracks of your loneliness. And yet, what you mistake for intimacy is strategy. They are not learning who you are. They are constructing who they need you to believe you are. This is the trick of idealization, to place you on a pedestal so high that you begin to confuse their image of you with your true self. And once you climb onto that pedestal, once you accept their framing, you become dependent on their gaze to hold your identity together. Notice how it feels in your body when someone overwhelms you with attention too quickly. The Stoics warn that excess flattery is poison disguised as sweetness. The narcissist knows this. They know your defense is lower when your ego is stroked, when your hunger for validation is fed. And in that lowering, they plant their hooks. In truth, this trick is not about love. It is about possession. By convincing you that you are the most extraordinary, irreplaceable being, they tie your sense of worth to their recognition. It is no longer your reflection you trust, but theirs. And when the pedestal eventually shifts, as it always does, you will feel the ground collapse beneath you. For now, you float in the glow of their worship. But beneath the glow lies calculation, and beneath calculation lies emptiness. It is not your soul they cherish, but the energy they can harvest from your desire to remain adored. This is the first darkness, idealization. Not because it uplifts, but because it blinds. The pedestal never lasts. What rises under the weight of fantasy must eventually be toppled. And so, after the glow of idealization, comes a slow unraveling, the stage of devaluation. It begins in whispers, not storms. A delayed reply, where once there was immediacy. A half smile instead of admiration. A small criticism slipped beneath the velvet of their charm. The shift is almost imperceptible, and yet you feel it. That intoxicating gaze that once mirrored your divinity now glances away, distracted, cold. This is not accident. It is architecture. For the narcissist knows that the sharpest hook is not steady affection, but inconsistent reward. By first flooding you with worship and then withdrawing it, they activate the ancient circuitry of your attachment system. You chase, you crave. You ache to win back what you believe you have lost. Jung spoke of the shadow's cruel game. When the unconscious refuses to own its wounds, it projects them outward, making others bleed for its unresolved pain. The narcissist enacts this with precision. They cannot bear their own sense of inadequacy, so they hand it to you through criticism, withdrawal, disdain. But here's the trick. They will never break you completely. They do not want you to leave. They want you to remain on the edge, starved enough to chase, but fed enough to stay. A crumb of affection, a sudden compliment after days of coldness, becomes a banquet in your starved heart. This is not love. It is conditioning. The Stoics warned, when your peace depends on another's praise or silence, you are enslaved. The narcissist thrives on this enslavement. By destabilizing your self-worth, they tether you more tightly. You begin to question not them, but yourself. What did I do wrong? Why am I no longer enough? And so the spell deepens. You twist into the shape they require, hoping to restore their original adoration, not realizing that the game was never about love. It was about control. This is a dark art of devaluation. The turning of warmth into cold, of adoration into disdain, not to drive you away, but to keep you desperate for return. The cruelty lies not in their withdrawal, but in the way they teach you to hunger for what should have been freely given. When the pedestal cracks and the warmth turns cold, confusion takes root. You search for reasons, for explanations, for fragments of logic to steady your spiraling mind. And into this uncertainty, the narcissist plants their most insidious weapon, gaslighting. It does not roar. It whispers. A subtle denial here, a casual contradiction there. I never said that. You're imagining things. You're too sensitive. Each phrase small enough to pass unnoticed, yet sharp enough to pierce your certainty. Carl Jung described madness as a splitting of the psyche, the disconnection between what is seen, felt, and believed. Gaslighting creates this fracture deliberately. It rewrites memory, twists perception, erodes the trust you have in your own inner compass. Slowly, you begin to doubt not the narcissist, but yourself. This is their brilliance. They do not need to cage you with walls when they can cage you with uncertainty. If you can be persuaded that your instincts are false, that your emotions are exaggerations, that your memory is unreliable, then your dependence shifts entirely. They become the arbiter of truth, the anchor of reality, the one you must cling to because you can no longer cling to yourself. The Stoics warn against giving one's sovereignty away, for to place your peace in the hands of another is to forfeit freedom. Gaslighting is the theft of sovereignty. It strips you of the very foundation of empowerment, the ability to trust your perception, your judgment, your inner knowing. Notice how it feels when someone questions not just your actions, but your sanity. The ground trembles beneath you. What you saw, you now doubt. What you heard, you now question. What you felt, you now dismiss. This erosion is not chaos by accident. It is chaos by design. And yet, here's the paradox. The more you doubt yourself, the more you seek their validation to restore what they themselves dismantled. The very hand that pushed you into the storm becomes the hand you reach for to lead you out. This is the dark genius of gaslighting. The destruction of reality until the narcissist becomes the only reality left. The fifth trick hides beneath the cloak of silence. Narcissists weaponize absence the way warriors once sharpened blades. They vanish, withdraw, turn cold and mute, not because they're lost in thought, but because silence itself becomes a theater of power. In this desert response, your mind races. Did you say too much? Did you do something wrong? You wander in the barren landscape they constructed, desperately seeking water in the form of validation. Carl Jung once wrote of the unconscious as a vast ocean. When silence falls, you are plunged into that ocean without compass or light, and the waters feel hostile. Yet what you are truly confronting is not them, but your own shadow, the ancient wound of abandonment, the primal terror of being unseen, unheard, unworthy. The narcissist does not give you silence as a gift of stillness. They hand it to you as a mirror, hoping you will drown in your own reflection. From a Stoic perspective, silence is not a threat, but a discipline. Marcus Aurelius reminds us that the world cannot control the mind unless the mind consents. Yet the narcissist relies on your consent, on your willingness to interpret their silence as condemnation rather than irrelevance. When you give in, you are already speaking their language, a language of erasure. In feminine empowerment, silence is not submission, but allure. A woman who holds her stillness without fear commands a room more powerfully than the one who pleads for sound. The narcissist's silence only becomes a weapon when you feel you must break it. But when you rest within your own silence, when you sit as queen upon your throne of inner calm, the spell collapses. Their silence returns to them empty, echoing through their hollow self. The paradox emerges. What they deploy as punishment becomes your sanctuary. In the archetypal dance, the narcissist imagines themselves as a puppeteer, holding strings made of quiet. Yet the feminine archetype, the wise woman, the sovereign, the mystic, knows how to turn emptiness into strength. She listens to silence as though it were music, and finds within it the notes of her own forgotten song. So ask yourself, when faced with silence, will you crumble into noise, or will you transform into a cathedral of self-possession? The sixth trick is projection, the most insidious alchemy of the narcissist mind. They take what festers within themselves, the envy, the rage, the hunger for control, and cast it upon you as though you were its source. Suddenly, you become the selfish one, the manipulator, the cold-hearted villain. And because their conviction burns so fiercely, you begin to doubt your own reflection. Carl Jung named projection one of the most dangerous mechanisms of psyche. He warned that what we refuse to acknowledge in ourselves, we inevitably hurl onto others. For the narcissist, this is not unconscious. It is survival. Their fragile ego cannot bear to house its own darkness, so they place it in your hands, staining your skin with their shame. You become a vessel for their disowned shadow. This inversion of reality works because you care. Your empathy becomes a stage on which their projections perform. You question yourself, turn inward, search for flaws that are not yours. And in this spiral of doubt, the narcissist finds safety. For if you carry their darkness, they need not confront it. Yet here lies the secret Jung whispered. To endure projection is also to witness it. When you learn to see that what they accuse you of is the very thing they fear within themselves, their power begins to fracture. The archetype of the feminine seer, the oracle, awakens here. She does not absorb projection. She reflects it back, like a still pool that reveals the face of the one who gazes into it. From a stoic lens, projection is only a shadow thrown across the wall of perception. Epictetus reminds us that no insult, no accusation, no slander can touch the soul unless the soul permits it. The narcissist may cry out, may call you the destroyer, the betrayer, the cruel one, but their words are merely echoes of their own disowned self. And when you refuse to carry what is not yours, when you refuse to be their mirror, their spell unravels. For the feminine who has walked through shadow work knows, not every burden handed to her must be accepted. She can choose which flames to hold and which to let burn out in the cold air. So when a narcissist tells you who you are, pause. Ask, is this truly me, or is this the ghost of who they fear to be? That question alone is enough to pierce the illusion, to return their projection to its rightful home. The seventh and most devastating trick is the cycle of idealization and devaluation, the cruel theater where love becomes a weapon and devotion becomes a stage upon which your spirit is tested. It begins with adoration. They see you, or rather, they make you feel seen, as if every corner of your being were finally illuminated by the rarest sunlight. Their words arrive like poetry, their gaze drenched in reverence. You are their muse, their savior, their chosen one. In this intoxicating flood of affection, your nervous system softens, your heart unlocks, your guard dissolves. You believe you have found something eternal. But this worship is not love. It is scaffolding, a structure designed only to collapse. For as soon as you lean upon it, as soon as you invest your faith, the second act begins. Devaluation. The words that once lifted you now cut with surgical cruelty. The gaze that once adored you now scans with contempt. Suddenly, you are too much or not enough. Your smallest mistakes are magnified, your virtues dismissed. You stumble through confusion, asking, what changed? What did I do wrong? Jung would tell you that nothing about you has changed. What shifts is a projection. In the first act, they projected their own idealized self onto you. You bore their unclaimed light. But because they cannot sustain that light within themselves, it collapses, and now they project their shadow. You become both goddess and demon, exalted and condemned, until you no longer know which reflection is yours. This is not love, but possession. It is the archetype of the trickster, dressed in romance, luring you into dependence so that your sense of self begins to orbit around their approval. And the cruelest irony? They create the wound, then convince you that only they can soothe it. But the oracle within you knows better. The stoic within you whispers that no soul should anchor itself to another's unstable tide. True love is steady, grounded, rooted in presence. It does not swing between ecstasy and cruelty like a pendulum of madness. When you awaken to this truth, the theater burns away, and you see the stage for what it is, a performance meant to keep you spellbound. The power of individuation lies here, in stepping off their stage and reclaiming the script of your own life. To refuse to play their roles of angel and demon. To walk away, not in anger, but in clarity. For what they cannot control, they cannot consume. And so the cycle ends not with their permission, but with your recognition. When the archetypal feminine declares, I am not your dream, and I am not your shadow. I am my own wholeness. The narcissist loses a theater that feeds them. And in that silence, you reclaim yourself. And so, the labyrinth is revealed. 7 tricks, woven from shadows, projected upon you like smoke and mirrors. Each one designed not to love you, but to bind you. Not to honor you, but to consume you. Yet within every shadow lies a doorway. Jung taught that projection is not a curse, but a compass. The cruelty of the narcissist, though merciless, reflects something deeper, not about your worth, but about their emptiness. Their games are not proof of your weakness, but of their fear. Fear of intimacy, fear of being truly seen, fear of a love they cannot control. And here's the paradox. The very thing they sought to fracture within you is a thing that cannot be destroyed, your essence, the anima, the archetypal feminine, the inner sovereign who does not bow to the trickster's theater. She is not lost. She is waiting, waiting for you to look inward, to step beyond their mirrors, and to meet yourself again. This is the work of shadow, to take the pain they carved into you and alchemize it into power. To realize that love is not something you beg for, not something you perform for, not something you bleed for. It is something you embody. It radiates from self-respect, from boundaries, from the silent strength of knowing your own worth. So if you find yourself haunted by the tricks of the narcissist, remember, they did not break you. They revealed where you must awaken. Their darkness does not define you. It points you back to the light you carry within. And when you rise, clear, whole, untouchable, their games fall apart like smoke dissolving in the wind. Because in the end, the most powerful act of defiance is not revenge, not bitterness, but this: to live freely, to love wisely, and to never again hand your soul to someone who only sought to use it as their mirror. The theater ends when you walk away. The spell shatters when you no longer play your role. And in that silence, you hear it. The sound of your own voice, steady, unbroken, eternal.